My guest on today's podcast is Elisha, the founder of TukToro, a game that teaches children mathematics. As you may know, dice games have been helping to promote understanding of numbers and quantities for thousands of years. TukToro combines both and brings the learning experience into the digital world. We talked about how he came up with the idea for TukToro, how he got the founders of Tonybox on board, among others, and what the future holds. Enjoy the episode. Elisha, it's great to have you here.
Yes, Daniel Jung, I'm glad. It's a good thing, I have to say.
I have to thank you for founding a startup because otherwise you would be my YouTube competition now. You also tried things out on YouTube. Why? You were pretty young then, right? 16.
Exactly, 16 years old.
It was always about learning, wasn't it?
Exactly. Back then I founded the channel Everyday Psychology.
Everyday Psychology.
Exactly, that was just the name back then. I've since changed it to my real name, Elisha, like You with Math by Daniel Jung. I've always found it fascinating how people make decisions and learn. And I always thought, if kids and teenagers are on YouTube, then they should also learn something there. I already knew back then how to use social media channels. And then I somehow went viral with a video about how to get out of bed in the morning. It was a combination of psychology, but also a bit of comedy. And yeah, always with something to learn. That was always my focus.
When was that?
Wow, 2017, that was 10 years ago.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Insane, really. That was a long time ago. Did your mother play a role there as a noise psychologist?
Yeah, definitely. Not with the YouTube channel, but in general, my mother is a noise psychologist. And I think she taught me very early on to just start my own projects and not to be afraid if something goes wrong. I still remember one thing that really stuck with me. I got a really bad grade, came home, and was super frustrated. And then I just went out to eat doner with my mother, as a reward anyway. And I learned early on, okay, you can fail again and again, and that's part of learning. And I also taught myself all kinds of things in a very autodidactic way through your YouTube channel, including math. And I always thought it was cool to start new projects somehow. And the starting point, my first startup was, I would say, the YouTube channel. Yes.
Yeah, that's crazy. So how do you come up with the idea to develop a product in the first place? In combination, of course, with what should we call it, online world. You can talk about that in a moment. How did you come up with that? And then also, and the fact that it's about math, of course, which also makes me really happy that you founded this startup.
Well, I would say there were several factors. On the one hand, I've always been interested in how children learn with media, whether it's teenagers on YouTube or now all these tablets. I noticed that with my nephew. I always knew you need to combine the digital and tactile worlds for children. And my mother, as I mentioned, is a learning psychologist. And during my childhood, she played dice games like Mensch, ärgere dich nicht or Yahtzee a lot, and always used educational games in her therapy, but also at home with us. That's how I grew up. And then I thought, hey, I can combine this with a physical product by using dice, because dice are not as abstract as numbers, like you roll a 5, and I put that into a box, and the box communicates with the tablet. So it's an educational toy, a math learning toy, and I tested it with children. It was more of an experiment at first, and I tested it with my nephews, and they loved shaking the thing. Yes, I can confirm that. And the sound it makes...
You can really listen to it. Yes, exactly. Yeah, and right. And then I somehow realized...
This could work, but of course it's a physical product, and then I was lucky that the founders of the Tonybox eventually invested in us. Yes. Right, that's how it all started. It was actually an experiment for my nephews.
Wow. I always say, when people ask me about early childhood education in mathematics, I always say, honestly, don't get upset. And you also have dice there, so you see the numbers, and then the tactile part, you pick up the piece and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Just explain again exactly how does it work? I'm seeing it right now. So for those who are watching now, you have the box. By the way, that's a cute box, right? Is that where the name comes from, TukToro?
Exactly, it's like a tutor, a learning tutor. There's also the Japanese character TukToro, and we took a bit of inspiration from that. We've now had all of this trademarked, but yes, that's where we got our inspiration. You can picture it like a dice box, similar to the one used in Mensch, ärgere dich nicht. And we thought we'll put a camera at the bottom of this dice box, and through machine learning, the images of the dice will be recognized and then sent to the tablet. You can play Mensch, ärgere dich nicht on the tablet, but you roll the dice physically. I can show you now. I'm rolling with 4 dice now. It also makes this sound, and I rolled a 5, 3, 3, 4, and now, for example, I have to enter the result into the tablet, and that creates a lot of different ways to play. Yeah. And exactly, it works like this. You have a camera at the bottom, and the images are recognized through machine learning, through image recognition, and then sent to the tablet. And I realized then, this is something that a lot of people don't know, that dice are actually really great for learning, games like Ludo and so on. Kids today use tablets more and play dice games much less. They play actively, so I thought I could combine these two things, but also create something that's playful, tactile, and also promotes individual learning. And exactly, it's just something new. How do you explain something new? That's always the challenge. It works well with children and they really enjoy it. That's what matters most.
Absolutely. I also enjoy it. I can confirm that. The tactile experience that you shake it, that's always awesome. You can really, really shake it. And then, of course, recognizing the numbers. And you have, somewhere I saw, you tested it with someone. When you've shaken it now, then you see the dice, and then you go to the tablet. She was unsure what to do, but you told her to just do it since it's a game and there are no wrong actions.
Exactly, right? And that's what's cool about us. The figure gives you direct feedback. If something is correct, it lights up green and also vibrates. And if it's wrong, it lights up red, so direct feedback. And that's what's missing in the current education system. I always say it's like when a child learns to walk, as it is now, they fall down. And in the school world, when you get a bad grade, it hurts 2 weeks later. But how are you supposed to learn from your mistakes, you know? And with us, it's just like how children really learn. You fall down, you get direct feedback, but it's not like there's a teacher who gives you a bad grade or something. Instead, this character, it lights up green. Or even if it lights up red, the kids just think, okay, that's kind of funny that I did something wrong. Now I want to do it right this time. And I think that's so important, this way of dealing with difficulties, and that you learn from mistakes. That's part of the learning process. Yes, and that's super important. Yeah.
How much experience do you have now with... So first of all, how far does the game currently go? So who is it suitable for?
Exactly, between 4 and 8, 9, 10 years old, something like that. We've finished preschool now and are moving on to first, second, and third grade as well. And that means right now our sweet spot is with kids who are about 5 or 6 years old. But in the end, I actually want to cover the entire elementary and preschool period with the concept.
Yeah, that's a good thing. What kind of feedback have you gotten? So do you visit schools? I think I saw you in a video where you were at an elementary school and divided the kids into groups. What has the experience been like for the kids?
Feedback, yes. We began with elementary schools, but shifted to consumers since the school market is tough. I repeated this, visiting elementary schools myself to test it. And I still remember this one thing. When we left, the kids waved at us, but weren't allowed to say anything because they had to be quiet, like that. And it was kind of like a save us moment, at least for me personally. It was a funny or very interesting experience. And for the kids, it was really great. But we also noticed very quickly that the schools do have tablets, but they don't use them. And our concept works together with a tablet or a MacBook, with anything that has Bluetooth. We have an elementary school teacher on our team who is now a software developer. And even she, who was really into technology, said that she might borrow the tablets once or twice a year and then they're not charged. And so there are a lot of little issues when it comes to digital media. And that's why, from a business perspective, the logical consequence for us was to go directly to the consumers, to the children. And that worked very well, and we got very good feedback from it. When I was in the schools myself, the kids also thought it was nice, but I think it's very difficult to integrate it into the current education system.
Yeah, that's a good point. The topic of schools, how difficult schools actually are, and this whole topic, I experienced it myself, that in my opinion, digitalization hasn't really been understood, right? It was often like tablets somehow got brought in, and then the tablets were there, but now they're just kind of rotting somewhere in a little suitcase. No updates installed, no software. And then there's the question of meaningful use. That's also a big question, how much tablet use is appropriate. I always say if it's used sensibly, it's just like a book. I open a book and read it and get something out of it, and if I use a tablet sensibly, it's the same. And that's exactly what you have with your setup. And you say, schools are difficult, do you think? Do you think so? Or do you have hope that we have a total of 45,000 schools, including some elementary schools, of course? Do you think the pressure will come from outside? I'll put it this way. If students use it and play it with their parents, then maybe they'll say, hey, dear school, let's play this at school too.
Yeah, we'll just have to wait and see, I'd say. Honestly, I'm not too hopeful about it because it's a difficult incentive system. So I think there are a lot of young, dedicated teachers who end up being held back. And I think that's one of the main challenges. For me, that also means that the reality is parents have to cover a lot at home or help their kids catch up. That's difficult since some parents are very involved while others are less so. And I do see that this gap is continuing to widen. There's hardly anything you can do about it, I would say, so it's very difficult.
But to stay on that, because I haven't given up hope, and I'm also thinking now, even without any regulations coming in and schools saying, okay, we're going to introduce something new, if a teacher now says, okay, great, haptics combined with gentle digital technology, if I have a class of, I don't know, 25 kids, how many TukToros would I need and how many tablets? Wouldn't 3 be enough if you make 3 or 4 groups?
Yes, definitely. When I was in elementary schools myself, I divided the children into small groups, and we had 4 groups and had 4 TukToros. And that worked very well. And what's cool about our concept is that many people think digital media is bad for children when they learn with it, etc. But you already made the right point. It's about how they learn with it. For example, we have many games. One of them is the chicken game, where the children play together and also play against each other, so to speak. And then you have both the digital and the social component in one game. And what's exciting about that is the topic of peer-to-peer learning. That means the children learn from each other. We then had, like at these tables, we had different groups, like 4 children, where we played 2 against 2, and they explained to each other how mathematics works, like what the right number is and why what the other person did might not be the right number. And that was fascinating to watch. In theory, it's possible to set it up that way. I think it really depends a lot on the educators and also on the media literacy behind it. Exactly, but we also say very clearly you can definitely use it in schools. We're totally open to that.
I want to stick with the practical example again. Let's say when I look at my nephew, 2nd grade, the teacher, and even if the teacher doesn't get the TukToros, if, let's say, I don't know, someone donates 4 and says, look, here they are, we still need 4 more tablets and internet access. We need internet access, yes.
Not at all. You need to download the app, which requires internet access first. And somehow once a month we get an update with new games, and otherwise everything works offline. It's all done via Bluetooth. That means, basically you just need a tablet and then you're good to go.
Okay, so 4 tutors, 4 doctors, 4 tablets, briefly on the internet, update every now and then you can basically get started. Exactly. Yeah, easy. How much does the Tug Doctor cost?
Exactly. It costs 79 euros, similar to other toys like the Tony Box, for example. Yeah. And exactly. And what's really important, I think we talked about this briefly earlier, many children come to school and they're missing a lot of basics. Or in the first 2 years. Yeah, definitely. Then it's taught incorrectly, or the children get left behind. And of course, in the long run, that costs a lot, especially for you as a parent when it comes to tutoring. That's a gigantic market, this tutoring market, and that's why I think it's so important to support children very, very early on. Yeah. So from 4, 5, 6 years old, even before elementary school, and then when elementary school starts, it's even more important because if you're excited about math early on, it will have a positive influence on you for life, like the 2 of us now. We're talking about statistics and we love it. And I think that if everyone felt that way, or if everyone could be motivated and curious early on, if we as a company could achieve that even a little bit, then I would be very happy.
Yes, absolutely. That brings us to a vision you have that in the next few years you set up to 2nd grade and now you're developing for higher grades. How should I imagine such a process? I always think about it like with my nephews now, I'm experiencing that all over again. Like that 1st grade, then 2nd grade, numbers up to 10, numbers up to 100, multiplication, division. How do you work on that?
Exactly. So maybe one more thing content-wise, a challenge for kids is always getting past 10. That's the biggest challenge. They often count with their fingers and somehow 5 plus 6, and then they run out of fingers because you only have 10 fingers, like that. And that's where dice makes sense because you can quickly add 5 plus 5 together because we actually don't have the number 6. Instead of the 6, we have a 0 so that the kids can first learn to add over 10. There are a lot of things, but that's actually the first big challenge. We do this together with a learning institute, meaning they work with us. the educational concept, then we go to kindergartens, to elementary schools, and test it with a group of about 20, so 20 children. And with what we learn, we then develop the finished game. So we've really built a pipeline there, and it's important to us to focus on the needs of the children, that they really learn something and that it's meaningful with an educational concept behind it. Exactly.
Very cool. You already mentioned earlier, you talked about machine learning, which is a huge topic of discussion right now anyway. I actually don't care when I launch this podcast, whether it's in May, June, July, or August. This is going to stay with us. Even though the topic of artificial intelligence is by no means something new, but it's like it was invented overnight by ChatGPT or OpenAI, the company. And then almost 3 years ago, it really hit us like a runaway horse. Bam, it hit us. Now everyone is talking about it. You mentioned machine learning earlier. I'll just say, I think from a certain age, you should understand artificial intelligence, what it actually is, where you can find machine learning, where neural networks are used, and what deep learning is. I don't want to go too deep into that right now. But as you already said, you use it. How else do you generally use data? That's a topic of data protection, right? So how do you see, let's say, the whole area of AI systems, machine learning, and so on, in the future, using data to create a personalized experience?
Yes. So the foundation in the end, machine learning for me is nothing more than statistics, really. And of course, it is based on the data you have. For example, on YouTube, you have millions of users who click on things and so on. That's why YouTube knows exactly what it wants to suggest to you. Yeah. And it's the same with learning. And what I find fascinating, in the current education system, it's actually often the case that there are only individual feedback sessions. That means like a midterm report card, a final report card twice a year. And what I would find exciting is if you could really show development with real data in real time, so to speak, so that you could see every day, okay, this is how much you've used TukToro, and this is your learning progress. That's kind of the future, what we want to build. So a tool where parents can then see what their child's learning progress is, because then you don't have the problem where you suddenly say, now I need tutoring. And half a year later, you only realize that the child is falling behind or maybe is gifted. So those are the two, every child is gifted. Those are the two topics behind it. And I find it fascinating to build that. Currently, for us, the data is anonymized. That means we can see, for example, which games are clicked on and played often. And that's kind of the foundation. So we're building that right now. Right now, it's still largely anonymized. So data protection isn't a major issue yet. We think about it often and we'll strengthen it gradually. And in the end, it's about learning data, meaning it's about how we can help parents make better decisions or also see what the child's learning progress is. That's the first step. And based on this first step, it would be cool to do something at some point. If every child always gets exactly what they need to learn so that it moves toward personalized individual learning like that, that would be the ideal scenario. If we achieve it in 5 to 10 years, you'd sign up in the app, complete a few tasks, and we'd always suggest exactly what you need at that time. And that would be cool if you could use that to improve the child's learning outcomes.
Yeah, how would you explain AI to my nephew? Or is it even worth it? Let's say if I look at elementary school, because there are developments worldwide now, whether in China or the USA, where they want to introduce children to AI at the earliest possible age. And I always wonder, what's the best way to do that, you know? So do you tell them about the history of AI now, or what do you even tell them about it? Should they learn about it in a playful way without really knowing that it's an artificial intelligence? Does a 7-year-old even know what intelligence is? How would you explain that to my nephew or help him understand it?
Maybe once again. So the USA and China, they're basically having AI classes now where children are taught this at an early age. And Europe isn't doing that at the moment, and Europe is, of course, very conservative with regulation first. I also have 4 nephews, and what I do with the oldest one, he's in 2nd grade. Now, we actually use ChatGPT together, and sometimes we even create TukToro games ourselves with AI. That means I basically taught him how to become a content creator, like how to make YouTube videos. I create games with him. And hopefully he'll start his own startup someday, I think, but that's how I did it with him myself. There are also great companies like Calliope, for example, that make hardware for kids. And I think it's really cool to introduce kids to technology early and really spark their curiosity. Because I think in the future, or actually I already see it happening internally with us, it's going to completely change the job market. but it will also create new jobs, and whoever understands how to use the tools will be really successful. And whoever just gets stuck on TikTok, kind of caught up in their AI hype algorithm, will have difficulties in the future, and that's why it's so important. You can't ignore the topic, you know? Many parents say, hey, my kids aren't allowed to have tablets, nothing to do with artificial intelligence, that's all bad. Then the kids never learn how to deal with it. And on the other hand, there's the extreme of parents who allow their kids to do everything. And that makes it really difficult. But to answer your question, I use ChatGPT with my nephew myself. We create games together and just try out the tools. That way he learns to handle it early.
Yeah, that's crazy. This doing things together, an older person is also involved. You don't leave the kids alone with the tablet, you use it in a meaningful way. That's what I gathered. So you don't mention that it's artificial intelligence, but as you said, you use ChatGPT and use it as a sparring partner. And that's how you guide your kids here. Your nephews, with that, we're actually on the topic of future skills, right? So that's again also a hot topic. Once again, like what do you actually need to be able to do in the future? I always am. Among other things, also with solving complex problems, and that's actually exactly what this is, a complex problem. And you shouldn't close yourself off to that, not just before ChatGPT and company, but rather include them as a study buddy as well. So I think that's good, but I still always ask myself the question, how early, right? You just said your oldest nephew is in second grade, and I always wonder what share it should have, you know, like in terms of percentage, right? Because I think it's always good to learn something in a playful way, to discuss things together. So how much is really needed there? Is there anything from noise psychology? Are there any findings about that? Well, I mean, it's all still pretty new, so what role should it play? I mean, if teachers are listening right now, you know, so how often should I use it? When is a piece of paper and a pen enough, even though I can't analyze what the student just checked? Is there anything about that? I don't know.
Yes, well, of course, there are several studies that give some guidelines, but in the end, you have to say every child is different, you know? If you have a child with ADHD or a child without, those are completely different things. That means it really depends. My personal philosophy, based on the studies I've read, I think up to 4 years is totally fine, even 5 years. Children can grow up without digital media. We even create screen-free games, exactly. Where you just shake TukToro, and for example, now I can show you, you shake TukToro, and if you get a 6, then you have to go to the side with the highest number, and then it lights up green accordingly. That's what I think. We're developing games like that, and actually, our CTO came up with some cool ideas for them. That's great, especially for kids aged 4 to 5. Then I think preschool is a really good time to introduce kids to media a little bit, and then in elementary school, they need to learn to use it as a tool. And I think that's also my main focus, how children learn to handle digital media. And you have to introduce that step by step. And I also think it's really good when children learn outside and go for walks in nature. And so they have both, so to speak. But when they use digital media, they should use it for learning, because I think that's super important, exactly.
And what you mentioned, that when they deal with digital media, that they, or as I always say, don't get stuck in it. We all know the TikTok effect. You start and suddenly 6 or 7 hours have passed without realizing it. And that's really dangerous, of course, because that's actually the problem. If you don't have a game like yours, which in that sense might make you positively addicted because you're actually learning something. That you just passively consume and then the time is gone. But do you ever catch yourself doing that? Are you yourself? What does your daily routine look like? Do you only have your big educational mission, or do you also browse the internet sometimes?
Yes, of course, we also use Instagram and TikTok for our company, and then I get caught up in those accounts too, so to speak. And last night I caught myself. I somehow worked for 10 hours, so a lot. I was super stressed, and I currently have a leg injury, so I can't do any sports. And then I realized after about half an hour that I got stuck on Instagram. I always do it like this. I install and uninstall Instagram. Honestly, because I noticed it myself, I understand how they all work. Infinite scroll button, that it goes endlessly down, so you can never stop. But I have used tools. For example, I also use a tool for YouTube, which is called Recommendation Feed Blocker. That means I don't see any videos suggested to me on YouTube. It's a Google add-on. Oh, wow. So that's why I actually use Google or YouTube mainly as a search engine now, and I would say that has saved me a lot of time. Yeah. And I think you're especially susceptible to digital media when you're stressed or when you need something to distract you, and that's when it's really a killer. What is also very important to me is that I think for many people, you just asked the question, how much tablet time is good for children? I would also like to phrase the question differently. How much smartphone time for parents is good? Because I think that's a point that's often overlooked, that children learn by the example of their parents. And when you see, as I often do on the train, the children are loud and then they get the phone or the tablet, and then they learn very early on, hey, if I'm not feeling well or if I'm upset, I can use media as a distraction, or if the parents do it too. And I think if you yourself are a good role model for the children, that's already half the battle because they naturally learn the behavior patterns behind it. And I actually find that the more interesting thought, instead of asking how much tablet time is okay for the children, but rather, hey, how am I being a role model for my children? Because that's something you can actively influence.
And it's good when there's a game like yours that you can play together. So you have shared time with the game and shared time with the tablet that is meaningful.
Exactly right. So I had two interesting learnings. The first is that parents often want to have some me time, as they say. Yeah. That means when the kids are on the tablet, I think it makes sense for them to have educational games like that. It also really depends on what the kids tell their parents about how much screen time they have and how much they actually use it. And yeah, exactly, that was one thing we learned. And the second is that you can also play together. So we have both modes, so to speak, where the child can play alone and learn something, and the other is that you play together, have fun, and learn together.
Yes, definitely. Me time is good. I can confirm that from my sister and her husband. At some point, you need me time. And again, if you have a game like that, which is also fun, and it actually works without parental supervision, right? So it's really like when you get into the groove when you're 7 years old, then you're already a shaker. Chicken farm, and then it starts, right?
Right, the kids can learn on their own, but parents need to be present for onboarding and similar things. And it's also important to us that the parents are always the ones who decide when the child is on the tablet, when they're learning with our tool. And I think that's very important. So, of course, we have two target groups. One is the parents and the other is the children. And we have to consider both and see how we can make the best out of it. We care that children stay motivated and learn something meaningful. These are our top priorities. Many apps claim to be educational, but that's not enough. But they're actually just a way to keep children busy, and that's not what we want to become.
What's your background, actually? If someone asks, what does he want to tell us here exactly? Who is Elisha? Where does he actually come from? Okay, so when he was 16, he tried to teach people something on YouTube, like how to get out of bed in the morning, right? But what's actually your background?
I studied mathematics for a while too, but I dropped out like you. And I've always found statistics exciting. Back then, I actually dropped out to start TukToro. And everyone said, hey, you're not really that smart if you drop out of college for a dice box. Yeah, and somehow 99% of people told me the same thing. By now, that percentage is much lower because I was able to show my first successes. But yeah, I studied mathematics, but I didn't really finish it. But I always kept thinking about it. How do children learn with media? And I think what helps me is that I am very self-taught. That means, for example, every weekend I think about what I need to learn next week. We have topics like labor law, we have topics like hardware, software development, but also marketing and sales. And then every weekend I think about what I need to learn next week. Then I look for the best podcasts on those topics. So very strategic. And that way I can have enough knowledge in any topic within a short time to make the right decisions or find the right people to assign to those tasks. And I think that's important. I think that's my greatest skill, that I can quickly work my way into new topics. And I've really learned that well, that I use digital media to learn something and not to get dumber. Sometimes I also get stuck on Instagram. But yeah, exactly. I think that's really the best skill
that I have. Yes. That's this conscious approach, but then also being aware. Awareness is the topic. Making yourself aware, no, now I have to stop. And that's exactly what kids can't do, right? That's the problem. But let's stay with your startup CEO life for a moment. How big is the team now? So you might think, okay, he has a game box and a tablet. Is that a two-man company? Oh, yes?
Unfortunately not. We also make hardware, so we are 13 people now. 10 of them work in the content team, meaning software, hardware, and yes, the educational concepts and design. And actually only 3 people are in marketing and sales, and that includes me. So basically everyone at our company works on the product. And of course, every day brings a different challenge. So managing employees is obviously an important topic, but also the whole game development process. You must constantly develop new ideas and innovations to succeed as a startup. Also, we still rely heavily on investor funding. We've now sold about 1,000 of these units, 1,000 TukToros, and we have our first happy customers. They always ask, hey, when are new games coming out? When will we get more games? And that's what we're working on the most right now so that we can also reach other age groups. Yeah.
Business modeling case is your physical product, the box costs,
Exactly. Are you thinking about
I don't know, monetizing the app or offering in-app purchases?
exactly?
Do you have those kinds of thoughts?
So no, we don't want to make any in-app purchases. I think that's a good rule, especially for kids. Once your PayPal account is connected to it,
It is.
yeah, and the kids will make you broke. We don't want that. So the basic idea we have is we have dice with dots. So dice with dots at the moment. And at some point we also want to use dice with letters, with numbers, and then move on to other subjects, and then we want to expand the whole thing even further, so to speak. That means in the future we want to continue monetizing content through new dice. That's the idea behind it. And exactly, that's also the business model behind it, exactly.
And what's it like living as a startup? Startup funding rounds, it's a ride, isn't it? Especially with, you guys are basically an education company.
Exactly, we're an education company. I started it 4 years ago thinking there was only a 5% chance of success. Honestly, none of the hardware startups I saw made it. And now I'd say we're at somewhere between 25 and 50% that this could be something that works or becomes very, very successful. And that's how I think about the whole thing. A startup is, of course, like this. Some, actually very few, work out, and when they do, they become very big. And I think everyone involved needs to be aware of that. Nevertheless, for me, there's actually a personal motivation behind it. I want to create something for my kids, something that's meaningful for them and helps them learn how to deal with media.
Yeah. How did you actually get in touch with the Tony founders?
Yeah, so back then I contacted someone on LinkedIn who works on AI at TonyVox. They had developed a feature at the time, but they didn't roll it out. He was from Berlin, and we convinced him to become an angel investor. That was the first one. He was one of their managers, and at some point he also brought in the Tony founders. But it really took a long time. At some point he told me, hey, what you're doing reminds me of TonyVox. And then I looked at their case. It's a very, very successful company. Went public with €1 billion, and I thought, hey, that could be good storytelling if we say, hey, we can become just as big as them, and then it would be smart to have the founders involved. And we managed to bring in a manager, and at some point he also brought in the founders, and I have to say they're great people. I had a board meeting with them 2 days ago. They give me a lot of feedback, and they've also opened a lot of doors for us where we produce everything. Really great people, and yes, that has greatly increased the chances.
But it's an interesting case. That's why I asked how you got there. Because you first contacted a manager on LinkedIn and convinced him. And then you practically, I'll say in quotation marks, took a detour to get to the founders, which also makes sense. Because, I mean, TonyVox will probably mean something to most people. I also know from my sister and her husband, they're also big TonyVox fans. Soon they'll probably be TukToro fans too. Because it's obvious, you know, since it's also a tactile product, well thought out. But even now, let's say, if you look at the startup scene, especially in this difficult field of education,
yes,
you want to deliver education, you want to move forward, and at the beginning you also need funding to take the right steps. That's also a kind of appeal, right? That you say, okay, you can sit down and wait until the money starts pouring in, or you can take action. And that's where platforms like LinkedIn play a role, because then, well, asking questions doesn't cost anything. So, how are you handling things for the next few years? In terms of funding, do you have anything in sight? Are you working on something? Do you have projects? Are you still spending part of your day on LinkedIn looking for potential investors to contact? Yes.
Well, we actually also talked about it with the Tony's founders. The last few years have always been very, very difficult. We never really had more time or more money than for 3 months. That was always the case for us. We were always on the edge, but we did it. At the end of last year, at Christmas, we closed a financing round for several million. Wow. And that was a very, very important moment for us. Now we can focus on development for the next few years. And also for me, I was basically on the road all the time for the last year and a half, and we were always right on the edge, so to speak. Yeah.
Classic founder life.
Classic founder life. So things could have gone in a completely different direction at many moments. And exactly. But now we've basically managed to secure funding for the next few years and can really get started now. And of course, that's also a big thank you to the Tony's founders. They opened doors for us. They had the right contacts. And exactly. So it was a good strategy to work together with them, and really great people.
And now you said what you're thinking about besides dots, numbers, or letters. Is internationalization a topic or a consideration for you, or is your focus on the region, Germany, Austria, Switzerland?
Yes, for now it's just the DACH region, but the USA is especially interesting with its huge homeschooling market and a very different attitude toward education. Because in Germany, it's often like this. Parents frequently say, well, that's the responsibility of the school and daycare. However, due to a skilled worker shortage, that may not be the case after all. And in the US, it's different. Parents also pay later for university, education, and so on, so the education market is a bit more private. And that's why they invest in their children's education very early on, because they know, okay, if they don't do that, it will be difficult later on. And that's why it's an even more exciting market for us, where we want to go in the long term. Because the homeschooling market there is huge. And right, that was also an insight, that American parents want to invest in their children's education very early. And that's kind of our topic. It's a toy, but actually it's learning software, a learning tutor behind it. That means developing everything here in the DACH region, growing it, then moving to the USA. That's the plan. That's also why it could make sense for investors. It has a lot of potential.
If you've already raised millions, that's exciting. Do you have a tip on the topic of company valuation? If a founder is listening now and thinking, my goodness, how do I handle my valuation? How high should I set it? Based on what? Based on what mechanism should I use? How did you do it?
Yeah, well, the reality is that in the startup world, valuations are often basically decided by rolling dice. No, but there are two models. One is where you say, how much revenue do you have? But I don't think that's very meaningful. Where you look at it like you make €1 million in revenue or 100,000 euros, and then you're worth 2, 3, 4, or 5 times your revenue. That doesn't make sense in the startup world. The one thing that really makes sense is to say that in each round, as a startup, you give away 20 to 25% of your shares. That should always be the goal, and that's what it's based on. That's also how the valuation works. Let's say you need 1 million, then maybe your valuation should be around 4 or 5 million if you haven't given away any shares yet. And I also think that's a fair thing for the founders, especially if you have a technology company, which is what I'm talking about right now. It's also important for future investors that you retain many shares, showing you're still incentivized. The whole thing must be successful. Having just 1 or 2% left doesn't help anyone. And I think that's very important. So my rule of thumb would be not to give away more than 20% of your shares per funding round. Of course, that depends a lot on whether you have a porridge company like we talked about earlier, or a technology company like ours where we have hardware, software, patents, and things like that. And then you just have to make a good case that it has a lot of potential, and then you'll get a good valuation as well. And my motto is always that as a founder, you should negotiate very hard when it comes to valuation. And if you're able to do that, we gradually raised more funding step by step, and by then we had the first prototypes. Then we got 50,000 euros, and then we did a lock with those 50,000 euros, and then we got 100,000 euros. And that's how we did it step by step. And that's why we still, we as the founding team still own more than 50% of the shares. That's important because it lets you decide which direction things go.
That would have been another question, whether you founded the company alone or how many co-founders you have.
Yes, so I have a main co-founder, that's Andreas. He's the one who develops all the hardware and also the software. And then we also brought in the first people who were involved as co-founders, and they got a small share as well, but the two of us have the largest shares.
That's an interesting question here, especially here in Germany, when it comes to your first employees.
Yes.
If you want to incentivize them, did you do that? Did you just say, shares, or was it something like employee shares, but then you have tax issues again? Or did you just say, look, the first 10, everyone gets this and that percent?
Yes, so the first one who was really involved, who also brought in software components and such, brought in expertise. We couldn't pay the salary, so we gave him a 5% stake as well. Then we also introduced an employee participation program. Okay. So that's not so good for taxes in Germany, yes. And then we also found out there are different ways you can get exit shares. For example, I wanted to bring in a friend of mine whom I've known since school, who's really good with finances. We complement each other very well, and if we do an exit, he gets 5% of my stake. We have different models for that, but of course that's a super complex topic in Germany, yes, because it's so difficult from a tax perspective. And yeah, exactly, that's really a tough thing. How to incentivize that in Germany is really hard. I would hope for more there as well. Actually, in the US, that's much easier. Of course, you want to motivate the first people. Intrinsic motivation is always important and present for everyone, but extrinsic motivation also plays a role because you work a lot and get very little money for it, and that should eventually balance out in the long run. You should be rewarded for that, and exactly. But we've incentivized everyone on our team in some way, and they are part of the success.
Cool, that's motivating too.
Awesome. So with us, it's really like this. We work on site. We basically never make exceptions. And even until, I don't know, 8 p.m., the place is still packed. People are really excited. Is it like that? We also start at 10 a.m., but it's voluntary, so okay. People can also leave at 6 p.m., but they stick with it. And I think that's something we've really achieved. A good company culture where everyone is really motivated and having fun. Of course, it's also like this. People can express themselves there. I'm not someone who, well, I really value that. My key decision is hiring the right people so they can express themselves and grow their own way. Ausarbeiten.
You don't have full-time remote.
Yes, so we made an exception once for a specialist. Otherwise, we wouldn't have gotten anyone. But otherwise, we don't do that. No, otherwise we're very strict about that. And yeah, I think that's actually very good.
And what do you think about a 4-day week, 3-day week? Do you have any guidelines for that, or do you work project oriented?
No, so we also have that. We also have a 4-day week with one product manager because we can't afford his salary. And we said, hey, don't you want to work 4 days a week? That was kind of the idea behind it. And yeah, but in general, it's mostly 5 days. And that everyone is there from the start. We also have working students. Yeah, we value having a community where we develop ideas and solve problems together. From my perspective, it's important to do this on site. And that's also very important to me, yes.
What if someone is listening or watching right now and says, wow, that's an awesome thing. I'd love to be a part of it and invest.
Feel free to message me on LinkedIn, and then we'll see what the goals are for the different people. Of course, everyone has a different motivation behind it. What's always important to me is that people bring some knowledge in a certain area, but also share our vision. And those are 3 things. The first is that learning is tactile, meaning that children learn with all their senses. The second is that it's playful. It doesn't feel like learning, but like playing. And the third is that we want to create a future where learning is individualized, letting every child learn at their own pace. I'm excited to see where AI takes this. And yes, that's kind of the company vision behind it, which also personally motivates me.
What would you say to, let's call it, a die-hard opponent of tablets and anything digital, so that let's say, a 7-year-old could still use your, let's say, overall approach? The system takes advantage of the haptics of the TukToro with the dice, then moves to the tablet and plays the game.
Yeah, maybe the 7-year-old has a cool uncle like Daniel or Elisha, so that would be my approach. I think you can't really change people much once they've already made clear decisions. I think what's really important, I believe, is an important learning. Everyone agrees that children have to learn how to deal with digital media, and then, of course, the second question is, how do they learn that? And everyone has a different philosophy about that. And yeah, maybe some have a cool uncle who can introduce the kids to media. I think that's a good idea. You should do it yourself.
Yeah. I only know the feedback from the last few years because, especially when you're working in elementary education, I'm very critical myself.
Yes.
So I say myself, a minimum of digital devices, but if you use them, then use them in a meaningful way. Because I also believe that if you take a book or a piece of paper, that's also a technology that was invented at some point. and a pen is a technology. And then you write, and you can also write on a tablet, and just as well you can play on a tablet and experience math in a playful way. And as you said, the playful aspect, the togetherness, the social part, it all gets covered. It's just inside the tablet. But it's not like the kids are just messing around, swiping and scrolling. It's actually serving their mathematical skills. Do you think your game will help us change the status of mathematics for the better? Well, I'll just say briefly that's actually how it is. Math is a 5, and through knee. And I don't know. And I always say actually mathematics is a lot of fun. And the foundation really has to be laid at a young age. And you are actually right in tune with the times.
Exactly, right? So you have to say again somehow, according to the PISA study, 30% of the children do not meet the minimum standard in mathematics. So up to 30%, that's a huge problem, I would say. First of all, yeah. And what I've noticed is that especially the kids who aren't interested in math, I had this once in elementary school when we started working with schools back then. We had a child, she had dyscalculia, but we didn't know that, yeah. And then she went home, told her mother about it, and said, hey, I really had fun today. And then she told the learning therapist, and today he works for us. He developed the chicken game, so that's how it all came about. And we definitely noticed that, no matter what. The children who are gifted, we can support them, but also the children who have difficulties with math or are behind, who just need more time, that we motivate them. And I think we've already managed to do that so that it's fun for the kids and that they learn something in the process. And I think that's the most important thing. That's the be-all and end-all for lifelong learning, especially in math. Kids get left behind so quickly, and then you make millions of clicks with it and help them along the way. But of course, it would be nice if that had already clearly happened. Absolutely.
Absolutely, especially at this young age. And like you said, the intrinsic motivation, that I want to do something, I want to play the game, and you don't even really notice that you're learning.
You can test your kids by giving them a sheet of paper with math problems and then the structures with the tablet, then see which motivates them more. Kids often prefer using a tablet, and you can use that to your advantage. They want to use digital media, they want to play with it, they see it with the other kids. If done smartly, you can say, yes, use the tablet. For parents, it's learning. For kids, it's play. And I think if you manage to do that well, I think that's a smart thing. But of course, it's also very difficult.
Yeah, where can you get your game? Everywhere.
Actually, everywhere. We're at many retailers. Here, Baby Cox, Korbmeier, so at many stores. Online through our shop page. We're listed at Bad Zug. That's also a shoe exhibitor, so to speak. And exactly, you can just find us by typing TukToro online, and then you'll find us basically everywhere, and also in physical stores. That's also the cool thing about it.
Did I see that right? Do you also have something with the Sparkasse? Are you somehow involved there too? How should I imagine that?
Yes, well, the Sparkasse, I have to say, first of all, are really great supporters of ours. Last year, we produced the first 5,000 units, and that costs a lot. And they actually gave us a loan of 150,000 euros, where the guarantee bank and I personally are also liable. So I'm on the hook too. If it goes wrong, I'm affected as well. But of course, that's also how it is. I had to do that back then too, since you have to pre-finance the goods. And that also led to everyone saying, hey, he really believes in his thing, so let's support him again. Okay, right. And they actually supported us there, the Sparkasse, and we showed them the project, and through a grant they gave us the loan. It was a really great thing and really great people. They really get involved for the regional startups. I thought that was really good. Cool.
And with stores like, what are they called? Thalia Hugendubel and Company, are you also in contact with them so that it's available there as well?
Exactly. There's a lot coming soon, but we're still negotiating with all of them. I've already been in contact several times with the buyer from Thalia. I'm in close contact. I've been to her office several times. And yes, we're negotiating how to do this best. Exciting. And but they're all interested right now. Yeah, there's a big TV show coming out soon, so now everyone is interested in having a doctor like that. And yeah, it's a really interesting time.
Yes.
Great.
Awesome. Great. Break a leg. I'm curious also about when the big show will be broadcast. Yeah. What people will say, super exciting topic, super important topic. Yeah. Mathematics is everywhere. Even for me, up to today, yeah, even after graduating from high school, when you go to college, no matter what you study, there's always some math involved, and there are always gaps somewhere. And I'm firmly convinced that those gaps started back in elementary school. And if you solve them in a playful way, combining tactile, analog, and digital methods, it's a great thing. Good luck. We're going to chat a bit more off the record now about what else we can do together. Yeah. Glad you were here. I'm looking forward to the broadcast and to everyone who's listening and watching. Yeah. Get it. Try it out. If anyone wants to invest, they should get in touch with you. And then I hope you guys really take off in the next few years.
Yes, thank you very much. I believe we share a vision to get kids excited about math and motivate them and hope to make a big difference. I was very happy as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
Daniel, thank you.